The United States and the Philippines have fully restored a crucial military pact after a suspension of more than a year. Last year, President Rodrigo Duterte had told Washington he was cancelling the deal. Signed in 1998, the Visiting Forces Agreement is considered a cornerstone of the two countries' mutual defense treaty. Brenda Bernal reports.
There are some 300 military exercises between the two countries each year, and the restoration of the VFA ensures long-term continuity of these exercises. Both U.S. Secretary of Defense Lloyd III and Defense Secretary of the Philippines Delfin Lorenzana said no activity was affected by the suspension. Mr. Lorenzana said the Philippines' notice to terminate the VFA, first announced February 11 last year, has been, quote, retracted as if nothing happened, unquote. But of course, something did happen during that time. At that time, with a notice of termination of the VFA was sent to the U.S. Embassy in Manila, a 180-day negotiation process was jump-started that meant the two parties could discuss whether to scrap, maintain, or strengthen the VFA. And that threat actually came from President Rodrigo Duterte to have that agreement terminated after his longtime close ally, Mr. Ronald Bato de la Rosa's U.S. visa was denied. Mr. de la Rosa is now a sitting senator, but he was formerly the country's police chief in charge of the controversial war on drugs. But 4 months after that notice to terminate, Mr. Duterte actually announced a suspension of the termination process, and multiple suspensions have been announced since. Mr. Austin, during his visit, reaffirmed the U.S. commitment to support counterinsurgency efforts in the southern Philippines, where the Philippine military is battling IS-linked militants. He also reaffirmed U.S. commitment that any armed invasion in Philippine territories in the South China Sea would trigger provisions of the two countries' mutual defense treaty. Now, this latest development is proof of what experts call the institutional inertia between the two countries, despite what is widely regarded as Mr. Duterte's pivot to China. The Philippines, after all, is the U.S.'s oldest military treaty ally in Asia. Filipino and American soldiers have fought side by side in World War II, Vietnam War, and the Korean War. Add to that, the Philippines will always be considered by the United States as a strategic ally by virtue of its close proximity to China and old patterns of cooperation. There's decades of ties that bind and parallelisms between the two countries' education system, military, governance system, and even constitutions. Juan Bernal, CNA, Manila.